What's up, friends? Today we're talking about a robot with a human touch.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what we're looking at here is the future we want is robots that are able to handle things as well as human hands are, and maybe even better. But the problem is most robotic hands lack palms, which limits their ability to grip things and handle objects the same way that human hands do, even though we're trying to use human hands as a method of training robots how to grip. We don't give them a palm to be able to grip. And, if you've ever cut your palm or burned your palm, you understand how much your palm is actually involved in gripping things by feeling that painful sensation when you're like, oh shoot, I cut my palm, or I have blisters on my hand and I'm going to grab something and you feel that shooting pain. That's because your palm's involved in gripping that object. Current robotic designs focus on finger dexterity. They're talking all about the grippers, the fingers, etc., but they overlook the importance of the palm in doing stable and delicate object manipulation.
And that is a claim that I think was a little surprising to me. But then I went back. Figure One is the really current popular robot that I think most are talking about. And I was like, wow, they're right. A lot of the demonstrations focus is on the fact that the robot's fingers can manipulate a lot of stuff. But if you look at its palm, it's just completely static, flat piece of metal. Same applies for the Atlas robot on the Boston Dynamics side. It's there's nothing functional about the palm. Every piece of engineering effort seems to have been put in the fingers doing something. And just like you mentioned, I think I also just overlooked the importance of a palm until it was explicitly pointed out. And I'm feeling around my hand. I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, my palm does kind of deform in the right way to grip something tighter, like a ball or something else. So yeah, definitely overlooked. Super excited to see what these folks are doing. And yeah, do we want to go into the problem more, or do we want to start talking about what they're doing?
Well, I think we've laid out the problem pretty well, which is a lot of robotic effort has focused on making soft robotics generally on the fingers, right, as the main gripping feature of a robotic hand. We've gotten a lot of research related on making flexible, and I think the word that they use is compliance, right? A material that complies and kind of flexes and bends when it touches something. We've got a lot of research doing that with fingers. We've got a lot of research doing that with even sensors in the fingers to be able to feel when it's touching something. But this team from MIT, I think they've got this really astute observation here that the same level of focus should be applied to the palm, because in the human anatomy, the palm is just as important in being able to grab things. So I think that's a perfect segue to talk about what exactly they worked on, what they focused on. But the long and the short of it here is they're if we use the palms on our human hands as such an important part of being able to grip things, feel that we're gripping things, and interact with the world around us, we should also take that same level of focus when we're making robotic hands.
Yeah, and I like their philosophy when it comes to this solution that they were exploring, which was you need both structural and material compliance. So, on the structure side, think about the flesh and the structure of your hands. You have your bones. They're able to kind of move back and forth to make be more accommodating to whatever you want to grab, which is great. Same thing goes for the small bones in your palm. But on top of that, you have flesh and muscle that you can think of as the material that is to be compliant. It's not super rigid. It can kind of deform to make room and better grip onto the object that you want to grab to. Most robotics are very good at the structural compliance portion of it, where they can, articulate in a way to grab something, but there usually isn't a lot of material compliance there.
Well, and I liked what they did here is where, and I think it kind of, at least to my understanding, has filled a gap that we've seen in the robotics realm so far, is they have this strong skeleton structure in there that is kind of flexible. They call it a semi-flexible skeleton. And then on top of that, they do have this really squishy, soft gel. So then between the two, they're able to create this structure that's strong enough to be able to create force to grab items, but also soft enough to be able to absorb the different changes in geometry and the way that might interact with the hand and with the palm. In a way that not only allows it to pick up different shaped items without dropping them and without damaging them, because that already is, I view that as task 0. That's the minimum that you have to be able to achieve to call this a viable robotic gripper. On top of that, they're able to use the compliance as a method of creating feedback to help the robot understand what it is that it's gripping, what the geometry of the thing that it's gripping, what it feels like, what it's gripping. And so compliance was not only used as a way of mitigating damage to the item that it's picking up or mitigating issues with picking up items that are different shapes. It also is used as a feedback mechanism to help the robot understand what it's grabbing, which is basically a proxy for feeling. Like when we pick up things, we can feel the items that we're picking up, basically using this compliance as a feedback mechanism for as a proxy for the robot actually feeling the things that it's picking up and interacting with the world around it.
Yeah, and just before we go further, I think it's worth noting this like objective that they have and this philosophy about what a robotic hand should be manifested in a platform that has, I would say, like two core components. You have this gel palm, as the name implies, it's a gel-based palm with a bunch of Romeo fingers on it. Romeo is actually an acronym. Let me see if I wrote it down. I feel like I did. Rigid modular something.
Robotic modular endoskeleton.
I got
optical.
one word right. Yes. And those are essentially the fingers. So you have this gel palm. It's a component that has, in their iteration, two cantilevered beams that allow the structure to kind of like, deform, collapse, comply structurally with a layer of gel on top of it so that the material can also comply as it's trying to grab something. And then the nice thing about this platform is that you can then choose the type and the number of fingers that you want attached to it. And these Romeo fingers, kind of follow the same methodology. They also have a rigid structure with a silicone material that's casted onto them. And both the gel palm and these fingers have LED strips in them to aid with that sensing technology that you were talking about.
Well, and one of the things that I want to mention is they have an awesome simulation that you actually clipped and you put it in our notes, but it's also linked in the show notes, is showing the difference between if you have like a compliant structure in the palm, so that flexible skeleton, versus if you have a compliant gel, which is like the soft skin on top of it. It shows the difference in the amount of contact that the robot hand is able to have with the object that it's picking up. And if you have just a compliant structure, it's really, really good at conforming to the macro geometry, let's say the overall shape of the item, like basically whether it's like a square or if it's a circle. But it's not really good at conforming to the micro geometry of the item and allowing you to create a lot of surface area, a lot of contact with that object. Same thing with the gel. It's really, really good at just the micro geometry. So it's good at flexing and changing to shapes in the local area of the object, but it doesn't create enough compliance to be able to change the structure of the hand massively as a result of the overall shape of the object. But when they have both a compliant gel and a compliant structure, they show the amount of difference of surface area that this robotic palm is able to get on the items that it picks up. Whether it's a square with sharp corners or if it's a circle that's really round and soft, it's able to create a maximum amount of surface area to aid in gripping, which is great to make sure that it's able to grab things effectively. But it also, this increased surface area allows it to get an awesome feedback method using the LEDs and the cameras that are built into the hand as kind of a method of reflecting light off of the object that it's touching through the surface area that it's in contact with, and then using cameras inside the hand to collect that reflected light and kind of try and get a picture of what it is that it's picking up.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to now expand on. We've been talking about sensing. You mentioned cameras earlier. This platform, the gel palm, actually has two cameras embedded in it. I think it's, they have a 2 cantilever beam set up right now. I think it's 1 camera per cantilever, and it's looking outwards towards whatever's coming into the palm through this like transparent soft material. And the LEDs, this red, green, blue LED is shining on the object, and these cameras are picking up an image that when, processed a little bit can give you a black and white image that ideally says, the darker spots are pressing harder into the structure versus the lighter spots. And that will allow this system, this platform, to interpret that data as almost like a pressure sensor data, which, think of this technology being used for prosthetics. You can use visual data to get sensor data. and you don't need to have like, tiny sensors embedded everywhere. You could just have one general visual platform that's picking all of this up and interpreting it to tell the user what the sensation is at a given area.
Well, you kind of stole my
Oh,
my
no.
punchline there by mentioning prosthetics, because we've only been talking about robots this whole time, but I think that's an awesome point, right? Is you're not only using human inspired geometry to create a robotic hand that's more effective, from an overall form factor perspective, looking at their hand, it looks more like a human hand than a lot of the robotic grippers. Like you were saying, Figure 1, an awesome robotic achievement, an awesome engineering achievement to be able to look at all the things that robot can do. But if I were to think about putting that hand on the end of my arm, if I had an amputation versus this robotic hand from this team from MIT, it does look and feel more human-like based off the pictures they included in the research and the video that's linked in the show notes.
And its
You should go
functionality.
check it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree, man. So prosthetics are an awesome potential impact of this. But I don't know, the using LEDs as a method of getting some sort of sensory feedback for gripping was still a little bit lost on me. It kind of feels like it went over my head, but you should definitely check out the article that's linked in the show notes. They did an awesome job of showing just how much detail they're able to get using this reflected light and the cameras inside the hand. Some of the things that they did was pick up small M6 screws. They were able to get a clear projection of the threads as it pressed against this compliant gel skin. And they're also able to pick the logo off of the stud on a Lego piece.
Yeah.
Again, just to show the level of detail that they have. They're able to use this illumination system, right? There's lights, soft lights built into the hand that shine light on the object as it's gripping it. And then there's cameras inside that collect the reflected light off of the object that it's touching through this clear silicon gel. And it's able to reconstruct an image based off of that reflected light. And one of the things I like is when in a super scientific paper like this, I catch there being a not super scientific term. And I loved the caption to this image says, illumination strategies result in decent 3D reconstruction images. And they're right. It is decent. It's not great.
It's acceptable.
It's not awful, but it is super interesting to see that they're able to like clearly distinguish the detail on an M6 screw, the threads. Like that's something really, really unique to be able to say like, hey, we're able to collect this much detail in the palm of a robot grabbing this item. Similarly, to pull the logo off of a Lego piece, just shows that this is a step in the right direction. And I would agree, those images aren't perfect, but they are decent. And they're able to basically reconstruct the 3D geometry of the item that it is that they're picking up based off of just reflected light and cameras inside the palm of the robotic hand.
And to kind of give credit to the team, the visual platform being used here, they have 2 Raspberry Pis that are doing the image processing, and the cameras used are Raspberry Pi spy cameras. So these are like fairly inexpensive components that you can get, off the shelf, and they're demonstrating that you can do something like pretty impressive just with that.
And on top of all this, all the compliant structure sounds super fancy. This semi-flexible endoskeleton, all 3D printed.
Yep.
The entire robotic hand and all the silicon gel around it casted themselves in probably 3D printed molds. Like
the LED that they got that's flexible off the shelf from Adafruit.
Yeah.
Commercially available, fairly inexpensive.
And I don't know. It's super impressive to me to watch them achieve like they are a world-class university, MIT,
Yeah.
but achieve like a world-class university level of research result, while also I think we appreciated as both being like garage hackers and mechanical engineers, this team's scrappiness to like pull things together and manufacture something on their own.
And you can tell like this is a group that had scale in mind. Like if we actually make this and it's good, then would it make financial sense to create this at scale? And you could definitely see bits and pieces of that in the design.
Well, and I think you and I both related with this, but you were saying one of the lead authors, Sandra Liu, who's a PhD student in mechanical engineering, you're like, I could just tell based off the way that this was written that she's a mechanical engineer, because she's talking about delamination of the materials, and like oftentimes
It was speaking to me.
We talk about the fabrication of the hardware to associate with some super interesting software algorithm. The hardware is almost always an afterthought.
Yeah, not here.
Thank you, Sandra, for putting the hardware first, because hardware is hard. It's not easy.
And it, warms our little mechanical hearts.
Our little tiny small mechanical hearts were warmed a little bit.
Yeah.
Our hearts grew 3 sizes today.
Yeah. The laws of thermodynamics were at play, thanks to you.
Well, so I will say, I think it's important to kind of talk about the so what here, right? The achievements, the significance of it. I think that one of the cool things they're able to show is improved dexterity and safer interactions with objects, as opposed to a robotic hand without the same sensing mechanism inside the palm. Obviously, you don't want to crush the items that you're picking up. You want to be great at picking up the items. But I also appreciated the icing on top of the cake here, if you will, which is getting the sensory feedback from the system to be able to understand what exactly the item is that you're picking up. I think about if I were to, grab my phone in my hand, using just my palm, I'm doing it right now, using just my palm, I can feel where the buttons are. I can feel specific item or specific aspects about the item that I'm picking up using the palm, which is actually a lot of surface area compared to the fingers. As a way of collecting extra data when robots are picking things up. And then I loved the application here in the biomedical sense that we're mentioning, like this is a potential application for prosthetics as well.
I'm with you, man. I'm with you. One thing that I think is worth noting is that this team really wanted to keep their design as lightweight as possible. They didn't want it to be super bulky, because if it was, then it would limit its use cases. And they kind of encountered this problem where, you have the 2 cameras in the gel palm, but you still have a fairly limited view of whatever you're grabbing, in case you want to look at the top or the sides of whatever's going on there. And they couldn't add more cameras without adding more bulk. So this is an element that they're actively working on and trying to iterate on to, give you the maximum amount of input data without making this a very heavy, bulky structure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Worth noting it.
And I think the configuration they ended up going with was it 3 fingers?
I think so.
For most of the testing. It would be awesome if they're able to create less packaging space for all the sensors to be able to add more fingers, because I think we're, at least from a humanoid perspective, we're seeing a lot of these humanoid robots converge on having like at least 4 fingers. And I think it'd be awesome, again, purely from a packaging and aesthetics perspective, as someone who, or trying to empathize with someone who needs a prosthetic hand. I think it would be awesome if they're able to get the form factor to be even closer to a human hand, as opposed to like kind of weird 3-fingered claw looking thing.
I can tell that's an important issue for you. So if the team at MIT is listening, can we please get a 4-fingered hand?
Or can we please go to MIT and look at your at your palms and fingers? It's pretty interesting.
It's been a couple months now. I think we're due for a visit back.
I think we are.
Yeah. Hey, MIT sale. Our friend Rachel, if you're listening, we'd love to come back.
We really would.
Yeah.
All right. Before we wrap up the episode here, I want to do a quick summary.
Please do.
Of the topic today. Talk to the hand, my friend.
Oh.
Robots are about to get a huge upgrade. Researchers from MIT and around the world want to make robots handle things as well as human hands can. But most robots don't have this soft, flexible palm in the middle of those robotic hands, which makes it really hard for them to grip things easily and gently and to understand exactly what it is that they're grabbing. This team at MIT developed something called Gel Palm, which, you guessed it, is a gel palm with special sensors and a soft design built in. It helps the robots touch and hold objects much more like humans do. This makes them better at working with people and can help them improve grabbing items, recognizing items, and one of the cool applications that I think for this is improving prosthetic hands in the future as well.
Awesome. Right on the money. All right, folks, thank you so much for listening. As always, we'll catch you in the next one.
Peace.